Your Creative Push, episode 63.
Even the darkest of moments are followed by an explosion of light. I wanted to share with people that good things followed bad.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is David Talley. David believes in a necessary resolution. An internationally recognized photographer and educator operating out of Portland, Oregon, and Sydney, his work exhibits the darkest moment before an explosion of light, a story broken but changed for the better, and the ability to transform the present problem into a prospering future mark his imagery. David is the founder and creative director of the worldwide conceptual photography movement, Concept Collaboration, and teacher of the artistic creation workshop movement, Create from Your Heart. David, thank you so much for coming on the show. Could you fill in the gaps from that intro and maybe give us a peek into your personal life?
Yeah, sure. Actually, the way you said it is, it's really interesting to hear someone say kind of my biography a little bit. That's not me like typing it out or reading it on a page. So you did a very good job.
Sure.
I like the way that sounds.
Well,
I
thanks.
think, I think that, that kind of, that gives you a little glimpse of like what I do and maybe why I do it. I'm a photographer. I'm a creative conceptual photographer, as the bio denotes, and I live in Portland, Oregon, and I spend a lot of my time in Sydney, Australia as well. That's where my girlfriend lives, and I'm actually heading out there in like a week from today just to stay out there for the month of April.
Oh, lucky man.
Yeah, I'm really excited. We're going to go travel around and flying into Sydney, going down to Melbourne, going up to the Gold Coast, and just working on some projects while we're out there. So yeah, it's my full-time job being a photographer and an educator. And I really have a passion for, teaching people how to be creative and kind of take creative control of their life. So I think the one freedom that I've been offered as a creative photographer is the freedom to be who I want to be. I'm not, stuck to one specific way of life that, I feel like maybe was chosen for me, but instead I feel like I'm kind of commanding my own life, which is really, really fun. And I get to inspire people along the way.
Very cool. I think that's one of the things that everybody kind of strives for is, like you said, to be like the captain of your own ship and to have your life in kind of your command. I love that idea.
Yeah, I think it's more of like, for me, I don't know if it's like this for other like creative artists, entrepreneurs, but like it's more of like I have a problem with authority and I don't want to be told what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, I was like, I had one traditional job like I think 4 years ago working at a Chipotle, and I got fired after like 2.5 months because I was like, I just didn't like the way the managers were doing things, and I let them know, and then because I let them know, they fired me, and then I was like, all right, well, it's time to be a photographer now.
Yeah, I think it's nice to kind of have that to dip your toes and be like, all right, this isn't for me, but also it's not nice to get fired, but it's nice to kind of know that you don't fit in there.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah,
it's like
true.
an excuse.
Yeah, and like, I'm not opposed to working in the creative field. Actually, when I get back from Sydney, I'm going to be looking at getting maybe a supplementary job, just because my girlfriend and I are looking to be married about this time next year. So,
Oh, nice.
yeah, we just want to have that like underlying. Thank you. We want to have that underlying sort of income stream and kind of, just have that as a backup as well. But I want to be doing that obviously in the creative field somewhere. So I'm not against it, but I think, everyone needs to have their own sort of control over how they live their life, whatever that is, however they approach that.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that people that are listening kind of, they walk that fine line. They want to do something different from their jobs, myself included. It's like your job has nothing to do with your actual creative inspiration, your creative desires, and the whole money thing is just such a nasty thing because you do have to support yourself, and that should be the number one thing.
Yeah.
But to be able to find a balance and to, like you said, if you could find a way to dip your toes in both things, like
Yeah.
where you can work creatively and fulfill that desire, but also fulfill the bank account, and be able to pay the bills, is definitely a nice balance.
Yeah, totally. And I think the one thing that I will say with that is that I don't know if this is something that a lot of other people like me have experienced, but I was afraid of making money with like my creative talents for a really long time, and
Mm,
I think it held me back up until even like 6 months ago, where I started really producing some products and services that I think people really love and they really get a lot of value from. And I think I was afraid to do that, and I think with people who are creative or pursue an art form of some sort, they're afraid because they love it. They don't want it to like get nasty for them, like you said. They don't want it to be weird or become this sort of like anomaly in their life where they're trying to be creative but they're also trying to make money, and like their integrity is almost questioned. But I don't think it should be. I think more people should try to give that value, and it should be a win-win situation between them and whoever they're serving.
absolutely. That happens a lot of times. Like when you get a job, you're excited about it, even if it doesn't have to do with like your interests, and
Hmm.
there is that excitement. But I think for a lot of people, it very quickly gets tarnished by that idea of I'm doing this just for the money.
Yeah.
That certainly happened with me and my past jobs and my job now,
Sure.
and your creative passion is something that's like so close to you. It's like
Hmm.
a relationship that you kind of have, not just with the world, but like with yourself. It's a way for you to express yourself.
Sure.
So the idea of that being tarnished is kind of a really scary thing, because you don't want to lose that.
No, absolutely. And I think the one thing is, if anything, I think we just need to go out in more boldness with that, because at the end of the day, if you're not failing in that area and learning, you're not growing. So
Mm,
I mean, there's a balance for sure, but I've never found I of course I've found times in my life where I'm like, "Oh, I freaking hate this," and like I hate trying to make money off of, photography or whatever I'm doing. But 2 weeks later it turns around and I push through that, and I kind of get to a spot where I'm like, "Okay, like this is a good product and it's actually helping people and it's actually making me money as well." So I think it's fine.
absolutely. I love that. And
Yeah.
yeah, the number one thing is that it is helping other people. And when you can see that you're affecting other people, I think that's the one thing that keeps it fresh, and it keeps it like kind of recycling, like keeps the excitement going.
Yeah, definitely.
So one of your like taglines that I love is even the darkest of moments are followed by an explosion of light, which is just a beautiful concept. Can you kind of get into that a little bit? Tell
Yeah.
me why that's important to you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for saying that. Took a long time to kind of come up with that sentence. It's actually what I call my single sentence, kind of like this idea where the sentence itself is the guidepost for everything I do and everything I create, in terms
Mm,
of art and in terms of life. And I think with that, I've tried that specific sentence. I've captured kind of what I believe based on a number of different things from my life, my childhood experiences, recent experiences that I've gone through in the last couple years, visual, inspirational points that I have regarding like light and yeah, just a general approach to like wanting to help people and inspire people. And I think with even the darkest of moments are followed by an explosion of light. What I'm trying to say is, hey, everyone goes through stuff. Everyone goes through crap. Life is like generally pretty difficult a lot of times. Yeah, no one is safe from the difficulties of life, but they're not alone. And after that bad stuff, I believe that good always follows. And I believe that it's not just that good follows, but that you have to seek that good coming after it. And I think without that interplay between, good and evil, we wouldn't even know what good is. So I think that's this
mm,
kind of like, because for a long time I struggled with the idea of like, okay, well, why is there good and evil? Like, why does it exist? And I'm a Christian, and I struggled with that with God for a long time. Like, God, why is there good and bad? Like, why can't there just be good? And I think one of the things that I realized in my pursuit of that fairly existential idea is that good cannot exist without the bad, or else we wouldn't know it. So that's kind of my way of inspiring people to say, hey, like, you're going through something bad, but it's okay because it's going to get better.
it's gonna get better, and I love the idea of it's gonna get better in like this explosion of a way.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
it's not just gonna get better; it's gonna get better tremendously.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's a cool thought.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, the explosion, I think, mostly comes from your desire to seek that out. I think it can get better. It always will, in my opinion. if you have some level of optimism. But I think if you really want it to explode, you really have to seek for it to explode. You have to say, hey, like, I'm going to turn this bad thing into a good thing. And it came out of a place of like I said, past experiences and the way I perceive the world because of those experiences, and the poetic kind of craftiness of the sentence itself comes from kind of like the things that visually inspire me, like light bulbs and clouds and explosions and all that kind of stuff. So
very cool. It's going to get better, but like you said, you have to light the fuse yourself
exactly.
For it to kind of explode.
Yeah, spot on.
Could you maybe take us back to your first or one of your first creative moments and tell us that story?
Yeah, totally. I'll kind of maybe talk about how I got started with photography,
Cool.
which is the basis of like why I'm just generally a creative person. But when I was a kid, my parents really nurtured my creativity, and I'm so thankful for it, because like without those guys, I don't even know what I would be doing. They were always, giving me building sets and Legos and whatever, just to like pique that creativity in me. So I grew up, being incredibly invested into being creative and like wanting to pursue some sort of creative um, art form or lifestyle or whatever. And about the time I was in the 8th grade, I think I was 13, going into high school. And my family decided that we were going on a family trip to Hawaii, and we didn't have a family camera. So, being as invested into like, camera gear and like cool gadgets as I was as a young teenage boy, my parents tasked me with figuring out what our next family point and shoot camera would be. So I stayed up all night, did all the research, came up with an awesome Kodak point and shoot that I was just convinced would be the best camera for my family to get. And we went and got that at the store the next day. And then a few weeks later, we headed out to Hawaii. And I think there was this morning, and I don't know if you've been to Hawaii or if you've ever experienced like a sunrise on the beach. Have you?
I have not been to Hawaii, unfortunately.
Okay.
I have experienced sunrises on beaches, but
Okay.
the Jersey Shore.
Oh, okay. All right.
Which is nice, but not Hawaii.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, like, Hawaii though is just this insane beauty. Like, we're walking out there. I'm with my 2 little sisters and my dad. It's like 5:30 in the morning or something in the summer. We're walking out to this beach, and I'm just watching this sunrise come up on the water. These clouds are breaking, and I'm just snapping photos, and I'm just framing these images, and I'm just like dying inside. Like, this is the best thing ever. I love this so much. And it was really that trip, whenever I look back on it, that my creativity was kind of sparked. I was shooting photos the whole time, hogging the camera from my sisters, whatever, getting in fights with them during the trip. And then I went home and illegally downloaded Photoshop, I think, and then started,
Yes.
yeah, exactly. And then started editing the photos with all these terrible edits and learning all these tutorials and techniques about how to edit photos. So I would say that was kind of the very first moment where I felt like I kind of had creative control over what I wanted to do. And it wasn't just this ethereal, like, oh, it's, creativity. It's like actually has like a name and a product. It's photography. And that's what I kind of want to think about pursuing, at least in the future. So
absolutely. It's that tangible moment where you can look upon something that you created. Of course, you didn't create the sunrise, but you created the framing of it. You captured that, and you were able to go into Photoshop, make the images, and then you can like look upon it, click file, save as, and then you have something tangible that you created. And I think that's a really big moment for a lot of people that think about doing something but haven't quite taken the leap. Once you scratch the itch, once you have a tangible thing to hold, it's addictive, and you just want to keep creating and keep duplicating that, or chasing that feeling. I love it.
Yeah, totally. I think it's so important, and I think that's something that we just miss, like a lot of creative people, because we're so idealistic. It's like, oh yeah, like photos are so cool, and I would love to be a photographer. Music is so cool, and I'd love to be a musician or whatever it is, but they never actually produce anything. Like, they never just go out and like take that first step or take that first photo. And for me, it just happened by chance, and this beautiful sunrise was provided to me. I can't take credit for that, obviously. So
Well, you could.
I could take credit for taking the photo, but maybe not creating the sunrise. I think that belongs
Sure.
to someone else. But yeah, I think you're right with saying it's important for us to have that tangible product when we are creative people.
Now, once you kind of started along that journey and made a career out of it now, what are some things that kind of hold you back that make it hard for you to duplicate that feeling and to create your work, your resistances, if you will?
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest thing that holds creative people back, I mean, this is just like my experience from talking to numerous students and other creatives, is kind of this just lack of a structure and lack of a
Mm-hmm.
deadline. I think as creative people, again, we are always like, oh man, like yeah, creativity, yeah, photography is so cool. I'm a photographer, but we never actually do anything. We never actually shoot anything. And I think initially what held me back, not when I was in high school, because after that experience in Hawaii, I think I sort of wanted to just like go skateboarding with my friends or whatever. But when I started to get more serious about taking photos, there was definitely a time where I felt like I was being held back by my ability to just consistently produce images, like just to take photos. And it was this time when I didn't have a structure to create from, and I had kind of no motivation, no because of that, I had no motivation to create anything. It was just like I like to take photos, and I talked to a lot of different artists, just being in the photography industry, and a lot of them say, I just feel like I don't have any reason to create, so why would I create? Or I don't have any deadline, like I'll just create whenever I want. I think that's just kind of like a fatal flaw, and that's something that held me back a lot when I was just jumping into photography. But there was a day where I was okay. So do you remember StumbleUpon.com? Did you ever?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was late one night, my senior year of high school, 17 years old, jumping through StumbleUpon, just totally feigning the existence of any hard work that I was supposed to be doing for some class. I don't know what class it was, but I was just bouncing around on the internet, and the tags that I had put in to search for were conceptual art and photography. And I came across this kid who was also 17. His name was Alex. He was living in Georgia doing this creative 365-day photography project. And I was like, these photos are insane. Like, these are just incredible. I want to do this. Because up until this point, I was kind of just shooting photos of my friends longboarding. I grew up in Southern California, so there's lots of hills and just lots of like opportunities to get hit by cars on a skateboard. So I was shooting photos of my friends and videos, but I just didn't feel like it was quite. I didn't feel like it was quite enough to say what I wanted to say. And this kid was doing exactly what I wanted to do. So I looked at it, and he was about halfway through the project, and I was like, I need to start this project tonight. So the goal was take a photo every single day for a year. That was the first part of it, and the second part of it was try and get better every single day.
Hmm.
And within that, I kind of found my calling as a photographer. And I think that was what initially motivated me to actually pursue the art form, because without that, I would never have, I wouldn't even be on, this podcast talking to you. I wouldn't have done anything that I do, because it gave me kind of that architecture, that framework to work from. And I think, again, as creatives, we love the idea of things and we hate the idea of hard work. And I think we need to kind of like combine the two into one so that we can actually get stuff done. So now, whenever I want to create work, unless it's just like a spontaneous photo shoot and I'm just, thinking I've got to get out and create like today, round up my friends and go shoot. When I'm not doing something like that, I'm always working on some sort of time-based project is what I call it. And it's just really a way to motivate myself to create something. So I usually put myself on, something like a 52 weeks project where I will shoot a photo every single week for a specific theme.
Hmm.
Right now, Kiara and I just started something called the Alphabet Project, where every 2 weeks we're shooting the next consecutive letter of the alphabet. Right now we're on the letter C.
Hmm.
So we're trying to, recapture that desire to create on a consistent basis and like have that motivation to create. And I think, yeah, I mean, it's not hard to create like cool photos. Like if you have the skills and you know how to create like a nice looking photograph, it's not hard to go out and do it. But if you don't have a purpose, I feel like a purpose in creating that image or an overall project that you're working on with a deadline to the end of it, you can lose sight of that motivation that you want to have to create. So I think that's kind of the way that I've defeated that resistance, is by putting myself kind of on a self-imposed deadline. Initially with the 365, which made me want to quit photography altogether at one point, but was also the best thing that ever happened to me. And I try to recapture that, on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly basis, where I'm putting myself on these deadlines that really don't matter in the long, the overall sense, but they do matter because they're the things that force me to create.
I love it. Actually, today's guest, Joel Robison, mentioned the 365.
Yeah, I know Joel.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he's one of my friends, actually. That's so.
Oh, cool. Yeah, he mentioned that in his episode. I love the idea because myself and a lot of the people listening don't have a deadline, because they're doing this on like as either a side hustle or just for themselves on the side. So when you're doing something for yourself, there's nobody else to really hold you accountable. There's no, especially if you're not getting paid for it, there's no deadline. So it's great to have self-imposed deadlines. That's the idea with the daily podcast, especially now that a lot of people are listening. I'm like, oh no, I actually have to do this. Like I made this rule for myself and now I actually have to do it.
Yeah, that's crazy. You're doing this daily. I didn't realize that. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah, you're capturing the essence of that exact idea just by this podcast itself. One of the coolest things I think too with doing that is that you've heard the thing where it's like 10,000 hours to become an expert or whatever in any one thing. And I think when you do a daily project like this, when I did the 365, I calculated about how many hours I was spending per day on that project. And then I thought about, over the course of a year, what does that translate to? And it looked like about 4,000 hours that I'd put into the project, just focusing solely on creative photography. So I was about halfway to becoming, an expert or whatever in creative photography, which was really cool. So I think when you're right, you do grow every single day. It's impossible not to.
Yeah. And just 365 days, like a year doesn't sound like that long of a time, but it really is. And JT Ellison was on the show too, who's a really awesome author. And she was saying, if you can write 250 words in 15 minutes, which is, not too hard to do. If you do that every day, after a year, you have like something like 90,000 words, which is a decent sized novel. You know what I mean? In a year, just spending 15 minutes a day, which isn't that much.
Not at all.
You can find 15 minutes a day, and I think that it just applies to everything. Just a novel's worth of material, of content that to put out is just such a cool idea. Like, sure. And all it takes is a short amount of time every single day, and not only that, but if you're spending that little bit of time, it's like your daily meditation. It's like you're getting in touch with that creative part of you, and you'll just be so much happier. You'll feel so much more fulfilled throughout the rest of the crap that you have to deal with throughout the day.
Yeah, it's so true. I think the one thing that people miss oftentimes with that too is that you need to want to do this. Like you have to have a very strong desire to do something like this. Obviously I can see that you have that by doing the podcast and, other people like Joel, who he's done, I think 4 365 projects, like just in.
Yeah.
Like,
he mentioned that.
Yeah. Like
he defined himself as very stubborn.
Yes. He is incredibly stubborn. Loves the guy to death. Very, very stubborn, but yeah, he's exactly right. And like, I think you've got to want these things and you've got to be stubborn about them to get them done, because otherwise you just won't do it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Could you maybe take us back to your worst moment or like the hardest time that you had with either resistance or just creativity in general?
Yeah, sure. So it's funny because it's kind of like twofold. The 365 project was incredible. It was like the thing that catapulted me into my career, gave me a vision and a purpose for kind of what I wanted to do with my life. I mean, before that, I was thinking, oh yeah, I'll be a business person and then create a business and then I'll just do whatever I want. And that was like completely very flawed 17-year-old thinking. And so I did the project, got out alive, did all 365 days, but at the end of that, I was lost. I had gotten good at photography. I knew the kind of stuff that I like to create, but in the 6 months following that project, I went from a very high of like, okay, like I am good at creating creative photographs. That's great. Why do I do this? Why do I actually do this? And I think there's a blog, I mean, like a website called Flern.com. They interviewed me shortly after that project, I think 6 months to a year after I had completed that project. And they basically said, like, why do you do photography? What is your purpose? And I'm like reading this question for this interview and I'm like, holy crap, like, why do I do this? Like, I need to come up with
Hmm.
something so I don't look like an idiot. And I started thinking about it and I went through, kind of a lot of different things. And during that time, I just felt like I was just shooting kind of whatever. And I was just trying out different things, which wasn't all bad, but I would say that was a period of time in my work where I kind of felt the lowest. I was coming off this great high of completing this amazing project to like this insane low of like, why do I even do photography and should I just move on to something else? And I think in that I found, an early version of what I would call my single sentence, or, what I say, that even the darkest of moments are followed by an explosion of light. And I think that was where that initially was birthed, because I didn't know why I created. I had different ideas, and so I gave them an answer. The guys at Flern, over the email with the interview and stuff, and I said, "Hey, like, I like to create photos because I believe in adventure and romance, and I craft that into a story." And it was kind of like this like lame, to be honest, sort of chopped up paragraph of why I thought I created photos, and slowly I started to develop this, what I would call the single sentence, just this idea that I needed to have a reason to create, or else I would probably never be motivated to create, or never make something out of this, never make something out of my creative endeavor. So I would say that that was the hardest point. There was times where I was not creating images for 3 to 6 months at a time, and it got to this point where I had sort of figured out, like, yeah, this is what I believe in. Like, I believe that good things, follow the bad things. And then about 2 years ago, I was on a trip to San Francisco. And the very last day, I was meeting up with some friends for the weekend, and we were shooting photos together. And we had some models that we were working with and some other photographers. And I was leaving San Francisco that day, and I actually got all of my camera gear stolen out of the back of my friend's car. And it was like,
Oh.
yeah, it was devastating. And I lost like $10,000 worth of gear. I
Hmm.
lost two weddings. That was really horrible.
Hmm.
Lost a client, uh, not a client, but a client set of client photos. Hope I didn't lose the
Hmm.
client. That would be, that's like another story. Um, and I had to, realize that this was going to get better. So I was on this low, but I wasn't sad. I didn't cry. I sort of just like saw the situation happening from like an outside perspective, and I was like, David, you have two ways that you can approach this situation. You can look at it as, okay, this sucks and your life is over. Go learn something new. Stop photography. There's no way you can continue. And then there was the other camp of thought, which eventually won out, was like, hey, this is going to get better. This is bad now. This is really bad now. But even the darkest of moments are followed by an explosion of light. And it was in that
Hmm.
moment that I really came up with that poetic sort of way of approaching that idea. And I think that that led me to, what would be, or what would become a transformative experience in my life, where I was, or I became focused again. I became focused on this idea that I wanted to share with people, that good things followed bad.
I love it. Dude, I think that moment that you went through is would send most people off to do option A, like you mentioned, to just quit,
Totally.
to say this is like a perfect opportunity to quit. So, do you think that the creating like kind of your thesis statement,
Mhm.
as it were, is what made it happen? Or was that like all at once where you're like, okay, this is what I believe in, and this is what I'm going to try to show everybody else?
Yeah, totally. I think I had to have like a very intense catalyst for me to believe in and understand what I believed about it. Because I remember when it happened, when I got all that gear stolen, I was with a friend and she was actually crying for me. I wasn't crying. I was like,
I wanted to cry for you right there.
I was completely fine. Like, I was like, oh well, this sucks, but like it's gonna be fine in like 6 months. Like, it's gonna get better. It's probably gonna get way better. Um,
Yeah.
and, she was like really sad for me. And she's like, why aren't you sad? And I'm like, it's not that I'm not sad. It's just that I know it's going to be okay. And I had, for me, when I was younger, I had to have a lot of external things motivate me until I could like internally mature enough to internally motivate myself. So I think in this, and like still sometimes, things will come out from left field or whatever, and that they'll make me think about stuff. But it was this moment that really helped me kind of craft what I believed, just not only about art, but about life in general. And it was that moment that kind of captured that.
Yeah, and I think one of the important things to touch on was like the idea of kind of looking at yourself from like above, like looking at yourself, taking yourself out of your own head and kind of looking as a general overview of your life, and that yes, this is just a blip on my timeline, but also like good advice for people is to take themselves out of their heads and look as an overview of what they are doing with their art, and answer that question as if they're being interviewed by a magazine or me or whatever.
Yeah.
Interview yourself kind of and ask yourself that question: why do you do this? And
totally.
When you take yourself out of your head and kind of look at yourself from like a helicopter perspective of the timeline of your art and your life, it's easier to see, I think. I don't know, that's just my thought.
Yeah, no, I think you're capturing something really really important there, where like I think we as a human collective, because we are emotionally driven beings, we often tend to act on emotion. And I think when we can separate ourselves from the situation at hand, whatever that is, and sort of say like, what is going on here out with me outside of the situation, whenever I'm dealing with something, situation, whatever it is, I try to step back and look at it from this outside perspective and say like, how does my single sentence fit into this view? And I think a lot of people can hopefully find some sort of like centricity over the around the idea of stepping outside of the moment that they're in, or even just where they're at in life, and saying like, what do I believe? What am I? Who am I? What do I want to say?
Absolutely.
And how do I process this, whatever I'm going through in my life, to match that?
And that is where we are going to end part 1 of my conversation with David Talley. I am very, very sorry to do that to you, but it's time for you to do your work. But I love his single sentence: even the darkest moments are followed by an explosion of light. It's just such an inspirational quote. And hearing that story about his gear getting stolen really shows that his single sentence really reflects who he is as a person, just the way he handled it. And it's such good advice as well, to look at a potentially bad situation and kind of step out of it and realize that things will get better. In a few months' time, everything will reach, homeostasis, whatever homeostasis for you is. And your homeostasis in that amount of time might change as well. Humans are awesome, we're capable of adapting to any situation. So if you find yourself in that kind of a situation, in a bad situation, you might as well adapt for the better. Use that bad situation as the groundwork for creating a new creative life. Start a 365 challenge, make 15 minutes a day to do your creative calling. Make it more than 15 minutes. Give yourself those self-imposed deadlines, because, nobody else is going to. Be proud of it, grind it out every day and adapt for the better. And you'll realize that you will have begun forming your own single sentence, your own guidepost, your own like scaffolding around not just your creative pursuits, but your life in general. And from there, it's easy peasy. You just kind of have to decorate the scaffolding. Man, I love it. My talk with David got me so fired up, and I guess that's why the conversation lasted so long. But that's good news for you and for me. We'll have another half an hour tomorrow to get pumped up as well. So much good stuff in today's episode, but there's even more tomorrow, believe it or not. And you really don't want to miss it, especially if you want to hear more about this idea of having a single sentence to define your life and your art. It's such a simple but really powerful idea, and I can't wait for you to hear it tomorrow. But that is all I have for you today. Go and get your work done. Be creative. Figure out what your single sentence is, and I'd love to hear from you what it is. Write a note in the show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/David Talley. Thank you so much for listening. If you're not subscribed yet, make sure you do so you do not miss out on tomorrow's episode. You can find it on iTunes, yourcreativepush.com/iTunes, or just search for Your Creative Push in whatever podcast player you happen to utilize. Go do some big things. I love you, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.